The environment. Hello, Ms. Ritchie. I am Max J. This is my Screencast Project, and just to warn you, I've tried to record this many times, and I've exceeded the 15-minute mark twice already, so I'm going to try to be speaking quickly, but be as understandable as possible. So let's begin real quick. I started with a quote, which is by our Lord and Savior, Senator Bernie Sanders. At a time when our planet is warming due to climate change, the last thing our environment needs is more drilling. What we need is for Congress and the White House to move towards clean energy such as solar, wind, and geothermal. Amazing. Okay, so the first part of the project is about environmental issues that we learned in CW. So the first environmental issue that I'm going to talk about is climate change, because I feel like it's really one of the greatest environmental issue, and I feel like we're going to have to live through a lot, but that my generation is going to have to go through. And so I'm going to quickly go through this and what is climate change. So climate change is, as a process, is actually normal. It has always happened and will always happen. That's just how the world works. For example, in the last 650,000 years, there have been 7 ice ages, which are basically what those climate change periods are called. And the last one has actually happened in the past 7,000 years ago, sorry. And that ice age actually created the modern day climate that we have right now. So the causes of climate change are CO2. So basically what CO2 does is it creates sort of a greenhouse effect, which is good. The main principle is actually good. But the problem is that when there's more CO2, then more heat actually gets trapped because of that CO2. But the problem is that we're reaching levels of CO2 in the air that have never been seen before, which is what we're really afraid of. So what effects does climate change have? Well, climate change will be causing rising temperatures, obviously, which will cause ice caps to shrink, which is really bad because ice caps actually act as mirrors, and they reflect the sun's radiation back, mostly back to the outside of the atmosphere, whereas the ocean absorbs, which is not good. So because the ice caps shrink, sea levels rise, which makes them make them larger. So then they will warm even more because they're going to absorb more heat. I'm gonna try to slow down here. And so yeah, that's it. Sorry. Let's go on. Some more environmental issues that we actually learned in class are overpopulation. So these are some of the posters that people made. So overpopulation, natural resource depletion, waste disposal, deforestation, acid rain, water pollution, loss of biodiversity are all environmental issues that we learned in class. The second part is the ecological footprint that we learned, and we did a survey to calculate ours about. And so what is an ecological footprint? The ecological footprint is the impact of a person or the community on the environment. So it's expressed as the amount of land required to sustain their use of natural resources. So how much they consume, etc., etc., etc. And so what contributes to the differences in ecological footprint between different countries? So more specifically, rich and poor countries. So in rich countries, people earn more money, and so they're able to consume more because they have more money. Obviously, it's really, really, really simple thing. But in poor countries, which are normally underdeveloped parts of the world, such as Bangladesh, where people are living out in the streets, and they're just scraping by. They're living day to day on their paychecks, okay, and so they don't have that money to spend. So they don't have money to buy a cell phone like me. They don't have 2 monitors on their computer. They don't have all these things because they can't afford it. But because they can't afford it, their ecological footprint is much, much, much smaller, which is why richer countries have larger ecological footprints compared to poorer countries. So Canada actually has the 8th largest ecological footprint per capita, which is right about behind the United States. The United States is actually 6th, and it's very understandable. It's very high, but it's understandable because Canada is a rich and developed country, so a lot of us actually consume, just like me. We're just all like that. We just want the new iPhone every single damn time. And so the third part is environmental management. So sorry. So, why is it important for states to cooperate in environmental management? Environmental management is really, really, really important for people to work together because, for example, if we're on an island, right, and we need to survive, it's really important to be all on the same page so that we all do the right thing together so that we can more easily solve problems and help each other out. It's pretty much the exact same thing. The island is the earth, and we're all trying to survive here, and so we have to fight this thing called climate change, and we all have to group up together and try to beat it up. It's really that. What is sustainable development? Sustainable development is the economic development that is conducted without depletion of natural resources. So it's development that doesn't sort of add up to our ecological footprint. So things like wind turbines and such as that, they actually help us because they let us consume electricity without hurting the environment as much as fossil fuels would. So the fourth part is international organizations. Some international organizations that I've found, and that we have learned in class, that we had a very large list, and even more so on the internet. Holy crap. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. There's Greenpeace, African Conservation Foundation, 350org, etc., etc., etc. But I'm going to talk more in detail about a few of these. So, what are their different roles and their objectives? So, Greenpeace feels like they want to change people's attitudes and behaviors to protect and conserve the environment. So, they really want to change people to make them a better way and to become more aware of everything going on around them. The AFC, though, the African Conservation Foundation, actually wants to more specifically protect Africa's endangered wildlife and their habitats by tackling the root causes of biodiversity, which is pollution, but there's also a very large problem of poaching in Africa. The 350org is more of a movement. All of these are all movements, but this one emphasizes on that movement. So they want to build a global grassroots climate movement that will hold all the world leaders accountable to the realities of science and the principles of justice. They want to make sure that all these world leaders don't run away from the truth. For example, Donald Trump. They want to be like, here's the proof. You can't run away from this. We all believe it. You need to believe it, and you need to accept it. That's what they want to do, which I think is great. I think all of these organizations, awesome. So the fifth part is international agreements. Some example of some international agreements are the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol, the World Heritage Convention, the Geneva Convention. Sorry, again. So what all these agreements are attempting to do is to basically fight climate change. They all want to group up together and group up all the countries together to work together, and that's what all of these are. There's many different agreements which make things a little bit confusing, but that's what their main goal is, to really come together and try to fight climate change. And there's other agreements. They usually want to group up a select few countries, but this is more like an international thing because they are trying to involve because climate change is an issue that affects everybody and not just a specific set of countries. So what are international agreements that have failed? So, for example, there's the Kyoto Protocol that actually failed because the goals were really unrealistic. They were too hard to reach, or there just wasn't the time required, or the time given was just unrealistic. Like, we really do want to fight climate change, but we do have to be realistic, and it won't happen from one day to another. But on the positive side, the Paris Agreement actually has been praised a lot because it's really like the first agreement where all the countries have actually agreed, all of them, and that's mostly based on the fact that all the goals for each country were actually set by each country's capabilities, and it wasn't like a standard for all the countries. So it was really great. I'm really happy about this. I'm thrilled, and I really hope that the Paris Agreement does stick. And fun fact, the Liberals actually voted, and the Liberals, NDP, and the Bloc Québécois have all voted for the Paris Agreement, but the Conservatives were the only party who voted against it. So now we're going to move on to environmental action, actually. I don't have a slide for that, but the reason is, the environmental groups, because environmental groups are sort of like the same thing as international organizations. So, for example, there's the Sea Shepherd, which basically fight illegal fishing across the world in international waters by using their boats to cut fishing lines. So it's a really, really great thing. They're more actually like physical, and they force themselves onto to enforce the law, basically, because there's no one to enforce the law in international water. So now the sixth part, the last part, is the government. So what does Canada do about climate change? So Canada wants to actually stop or slow down the climate change, and so it's trying to do that. For example, the Paris Agreement, their commitment is to cut 291 million tons of CO2 by 2030, which is the exact same thing as taking 62 million cars off the roads. They also want to invest in clean energy, so they actually made a $2 billion low carbon economy trust to fund projects that reduce carbon. So they really, really, really implicated in this. They also implemented a carbon tax, which will start in 2018, and it calls for $10 per ton tax, which will start in 2018, and it will increase to $50 per ton by 2022. The last point I have is, what is the carbon market? So basically what the carbon market is when a company doesn't have enough carbon allowance, so then they must either reduce their output of carbon, or they need to buy more carbon allowance from other companies who aren't using all of theirs. So that creates sort of like a black market, but it's actually 100% legal. And so the major controversy about the carbon tax is that people are afraid that everyday products are going to start to cost more, and so that's really something that we're gonna have to keep an eye out and see what happens. So that was my project, my screencast project. I hope you enjoyed. I tried to talk a lot fast. I didn't go over all my points, and I'm sorry it's so long. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, have a nice day. And Bernie Sanders, yeah.